Hey guys, Hidden here. Following the last few tutorials I did, I guess tutorials, just me breaking down my method, I realized that there is actually a better way, or not even a better way, there's another way I can show you guys what my thought process is and how I handle certain things by taking something I've already done and just breaking it down. So that's what I'm going to do here. So we have this image that I drew actually after the tutorials I did yesterday. Alright. Clearly red is a big theme in this one, and I can show you the three main points in which I made my decisions. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off everything there, and then we'll actually open up the first sketch I did. So at this point, I was really just kind of trying to decide what I'm going to do in terms of like the image altogether. Because when I started this image, I had no clear idea of what I was going to do. Like completely. I started from a blank canvas, no idea. So I just started, generally I start with about this far zoomed out, and I start really big, right? So I just started with the face, kind of got the expression I wanted, and then continuously scaled it down and down and down until we got to this point. So around this time, I'm like, all right, I kind of have an idea. I want her to be a little bit lanky, maybe a little bit frightening even, but I still wanted her to look like a good mix between attractive and off-putting, I guess is the word. So going over to the second sketch, like I said previously, I generally do about 2 sketches, sometimes even more. This one I managed to get away with just doing 2. So you can see this difference between the first sketch and the second sketch is pretty big, right? So I started adding some more like cloth. I think, yeah, I added the bandages. I made the hands look even more creepy, even more clawed-like. I extended those out a lot. Kind of gave her a more menacing expression rather than a cutesy one. You can also see right here where I kind of had an idea of like I wanted her to feel like she's coming down. That's not... Alright, so with her hair being up, right? So you know that her motion is this way. Now, granted, the tail here kind of goes against that, but I didn't want her tail to also come up, so I kind of broke the concept that it's going up just so I could have the tail in a better spot. That's a quick and easy way you can just kind of like fudge physics and just be like, alright, this says this, but this says something different. But if somebody's looking, they're going to get the idea that, yes, she's coming down this way, even though the tail's not perfect. And even then, you know, now that she's on the ground, the tail could have been up here and then kind of came down this way. So that's just something you can leave up the viewer to figure out. A lot of the times it doesn't really matter. And this is definitely one of those cases where I don't feel like it mattered too much. That's the background. All right, so I'm going to turn her on, and I'm going to turn all the colors off. Apparently I also turned the line art off. Alright, I also have to turn off that border effect so we can really see the line art here. I'm going to turn the sketch down a little bit. Alright, and here's another good example where you can clearly see like how much further I took that menacing expression in the line art. So I did darker eyes, like more narrowed pupils. I pushed the eyebrows down further. I brought the smile up bigger, and different things like that to really kind of go even further in. I'm sure I also detailed the claws and everything a little bit more to make it look even more skeletal-like, right? Because those are the things that I really wanted to amplify here. As for the characteristics, that's actually most of what I did in terms of like the lighting and everything, or not the lighting, lining is the word I was looking for there. But let's turn on these border effects and the colors, and then I can start to show you what I did from there. All right, so when I was coloring the flats, which is called coloring the flats generally, um, I knew that red was going to be a big deal in this image. So you can see I tried to make her eyes, like even here, I wanted the eyes to glow. So I took the original red that I wanted for the eyes and then bled them through the hair. Because if hair is going over it, you wouldn't normally see it unless there was something almost emitting light under it, and that's what I wanted for the eyes. Even though that the eyes and the hair share similar shades of red, I still went behind it and did a darker red. You can see spots like right here where I didn't quite fill it in, because that's just kind of inherent to how I do things. It's quick. I think this whole image took me maybe 2 hours. I'm sure it took me probably about an hour, 15, maybe 30, but 2 hours total, likely to get everything the way I wanted it. Anyways, so we're going to move on to the shade layer. I'm going to show you how I did that. I'm going to set it back to normal. In the last video where I did shades, I showed y'all how to multiply. I chose a neutral blue color. Here I knew red was going to be what I wanted, so I kind of dipped all of my shades in red. So you can see this one is kind of a reddish, but darker, less saturated. Here, a little bit more saturated, a little bit more towards purple, because generally darker colors lean more towards purple, or blue rather. And then I didn't want to use white for the light, so I used like a really dull pink. But on the eyes, I specifically chose white because I knew white would show its original color through. So when we set this back to multiply, you can see that that eye is showing so much brighter than everything else. And that's because I chose white. And that's going to allow it to like almost pop, you know? So around this time, you know, I just followed basically the same methods I showed in the previous videos. But here I just kind of took some spots to more of extremes and kind of reeled things back on others. Like I said, with the eyes, I always make the eyes generally pop, but here I just wanted the pupils to pop, so I didn't do the whole eye in white like I did in the previous videos. In the multiply layer, or the shading, obviously. Here, if you turn that off, obviously it's all white, but that's the flats. We're not talking about the flats, we're talking about the shade layer. Now, you can see certain spots like right here, where I put it down. I do a mix of kind of like sharp shading, and I'll come back and let me show you. So if you look right here on this, right? So I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to show you exactly how I did that. I'm going to turn it back on so I can grab the color real quick. So when I came in here, I knew that if light was coming down onto this plane right here of the leg, that I would want something that kind of looked like this, right? So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to fill this in. And then just go behind and clean that up a little bit, right? But there's two different textures there. So I'm going to take the blur tool here, and I'm going to go across that bottom line and blur it out, right? Because light doesn't hit absolutely, or I mean, okay, so light's not going to hit that surface completely the same across the area. It's going to fade out in certain spots. But to emphasize that that light is hitting two different textures, I went in and added these little strokes right here to show that this is a different texture than the skin, right? And that does a really good job of making it to where it's like, okay, clearly those are two different materials reflecting light. There's a couple ways you can do that, especially when you find things like, say, leather reflects light completely different than skin. Skin is more of a matted light reflection, and what I mean by matted is, so if we take, we can do it on her up here, okay? So if we take this right here and we put some light right here, and this is probably not actually where I would put the light, and then push that out and feather that out and blur it out, that's more of a matted, right, reflection. But here This is going to be more of like a metallic reflection. It's going to almost mirror the light back, so you wouldn't want to blur that out as much. And so that's what I was talking about, matted versus more of a metallic reflection. Even though in the original it looks like I actually didn't blur this out. Probably should have, but I didn't. It just depends. Like a lot of this stuff is, like I said previously, kind of brain dead for me, because like I'll just do certain things. Now we can go down to the knee, and here's a really good example of like light reflection and how I chose to do it here. So I knew that if light was coming down here on the knee, there would be a certain stopping point, basically, where the light no longer could go past where the knee was. So if I'm going to erase this and show you exactly how I did it, it's very similar to the previous thing. But I took this color that I'm using, and I just came up, and I'm being mindful of what like the shape of the knee would look like here. I'm going to fill this in, right? Very similar to the previous example I gave you, except for I'm now going to blur this with a larger brush, right? And then I'm going to come back in with a smaller blur. All right, we're not done yet, but that's generally what I did there. All right, now if we take this feather tool, this airbrush, set the transparency to, or set the opacity to transparent, which is basically going to function as an erase tool now. Now we can push this top down and really feather that back in, right? I probably didn't do that as well, so I'm going to push it back up a little bit, taking samples from the colors I want here. And then I'm going to come back in and blur that together, kind of just mix it in. So that's basically what I did there. Pretty simple once you understand it, and you can actually see plenty of places where I could have went in and colored this or shaded this a little bit better. But see, that's kind of like the glory here, or I wouldn't say glory. The advantage we have when doing this is we might not want the image to. All right, so if I went down here and did a lot of lighting effects down here, it's going to draw attention away from up here. And this is where I want people to look. I want people to look at the eyes first. That's the first thing I want to see. So that's why I put so much emphasis on it. I wanted red to be represented heavily in this image. That's why I used so many red colors. Use the multiply or the shading as more of like red tones. And then finally, I can talk a little bit more about the background and maybe even these like red claw effects. The red claw effects, I actually think I did them kind of poorly. I should have taken more time to really maybe even play around with it. But I feel like they served their purpose, so I'm not going to go too much into it, put too much effort into it. But anyway, so if we turn off the two things here, I can kind of show you what I was doing with the lighting. I knew, like I said, I wanted red to be a big deal for this piece. So I kind of put like a reddish dark sunset looking thing. And then I'm not going to have enough time to really explain how I did this background. Maybe I'll do a whole nother video in the future, breaking down how I do backgrounds and stuff, even though I don't feel like I'm that strong on backgrounds. There's a lot to be learned there. But anyways, guys, if you liked what you've seen and you want to like or subscribe, that'd be great. Leave a comment for sure. I would love to hear from you guys, know what y'all want to see next. But until next time, I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.